Earlier today, a guy said that the Trump wall along the Mexican border would not be paid for by Mexico. I said, well, sure it will. He couldn't understand that. I said, look, we have a $58 billion trade deficit with Mexico. That means that $58 billion each year is leaving our country and is going to Mexico. That's what Trump's been saying. He's exactly right. Well, what would happen if you need a $10 billion wall? You have a $58 billion trade deficit somewhere, and you simply levied a 17% tariff on that $58 billion. Now, all things being equal, that's going to get your $10 billion to build the wall, and Mexico pays for it. Well, he said rightly so. Well, look, the American people are going to pay for that. Well, it's not all the American people would be paying for that. No. The American people who buy the products would have to pay more for the products, but of course, when prices go up, they buy less products. What this is incentive for those corporations to move back to our country and build those products under our cost structure rather than Mexico's cost structure. But as vicariously, it'll also put Americans to work building the wall. So you've killed two birds with one stone there. A 17% tariff against goods from Mexico creates the funds to build the wall, which puts Americans back to work. Win-win! But secondly, I asked the guy, I said, is it right for us to trade with countries that use inhumane conditions for their workers? Is it right to buy products from countries that even allow slave labor? Is it right for America to pay less for something and take advantage of really poor living conditions, using the company store model that I talked about last week inside entire countries like China and Vietnam? Because these are communist countries. We're trading with communist countries. It can't be good to trade with communist countries. Yes, you get something cheaper, but only because they're taking advantage of their people. So that's sinful. If you think about it and try to look up Lincoln's second inaugural address one day. He said that both sides, the North and the South, were guilty of perhaps offending God. He said the South sponsored or ran off a slave labor, but the North didn't have to pay as much, didn't have to pay the true cost of the goods that they were consuming. So that's bad on both sides. That's sinful on both sides. So here it is, we're doing the same thing just on an international scale. Well, back then it caused a civil war. Well, it may cause World War III by the time we're done with this. So here it is, we're paying less for our goods, putting our own people out of work who then can't afford to buy the goods because they don't have jobs. Yet for some people who can afford it, they get a TV for $250. Okay, great. In the meantime, our economy implodes. The Chinese are not making anything because the living conditions over there are not improving. They're just getting worse. So it's a lose-lose situation in practically every respect. And secondly, all those dollars that would be, if we're producing at a higher cost here in our country, then yes, the goods might cost more, but the dollars are staying here. They're saved and invested here rather than saved and invested in Mexico or China. And that's what we need in order to invest in our economy. We've got to have capital. That's what capital is. It's earned income that is held for investment. That's what capital is. So if the capital leaves the country, we're still stuck. We're still having to chase goods that cost less. We need to go shopping on the world market and see if we can get something really cheap, because we can't afford anything else than something that's really cheap. But here's the big deal, one that people rarely really think about. And that is that trade deficit has got to be paid for. They think that, okay, we have a trade deficit. Okay, it's $500 billion, $500 billion every year, and it's not hurting us at all. We get cheap stuff. Well, yes, it is hurting us, because those dollars have got to come from somewhere. Those dollars, $500 billion, some say as much as $800 billion are leaving our country every year. Well, how are we replenishing that? How are we recapitalizing our economy in order to keep our economy liquid if you got that many dollars actually leaving our border? That's net. That's exports less imports. $500 billion. So if those dollars are leaving, how can we keep capitalizing our economy? How can we keep doing that? The answer is we have to borrow $500 billion more than we had originally, because that's how dollars are created. You see, the trade deficit doesn't finance itself. It's not free. There is no free lunch. It's got to be paid somewhere, and it's paid in a very insidious, covert manner. The bankers love a trade deficit because they see all those dollars leaving our economy. That means that they get to loan out more dollars. They also get to impress upon the world the use of those dollars all over the world. So they get, the more dollars that are out there, the more powerful the Wall Street bankers are. That's what it's all about. It's about money, resources, and power. So the more dollars that leave our country in the form of a trade deficit, the more in debt we as a society become. The more in debt as a society we become. That is the untold story about the trade deficit. We've got to borrow the dollars that are leaving our country. So that TV that you might have been able to buy from China for $250, you or somebody in our economy borrowed those dollars, and they're having to be paid back. And they can't be paid back because there's not enough dollars to pay them back. You see, it's a joke. Once you understand how this system works, it is an absolute joke. So that's another reason why we got to get Mr. Trump in there. Yeah, it may cost a few more dollars to put Americans back to work, creating the products that we use and consume in this country. But it'll keep the dollars here. It'll keep us from having to borrow more and more dollars, and it'll put Americans building American products and building an American economy, saving the American capital for American investment and American saving. That's what we got to have in order to keep our economy going and building it. That it's just got to happen. And Donald Trump knows this, and that's what he's pushing forward. So that's just another reason we got to get Donald Trump in the White House. I can't wait. See you later.